Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dinesh Babralal, and I'll be the moderator for this session this afternoon. I'd like to thank you for joining us to discuss the great balancing act of work and life. Over the next hour, we're going to experience a process of self discovery on achieving mental health while balancing work and home in this new normal. So, together, we're going to explore how to walk this tightrope between work and home. But before we begin, I'd like to just go over just two simple house rules. For all questions, you can post them in the Q&A section. And for general comments, feel free to post it in the chat so that way we don't miss the important questions. I'd like to take this time to welcome our tour guide for this journey, Ms. Maxine Attong. She's an executive coach, leadership consultant, and author with over 20 years experience of organizational excellence, which she leverages to serve the needs of leaders and their teams. I'll turn you over to Maxine now.
Hi, Dinesh. Thanks a lot for the introduction. I want to say thanks to you and Kamal, as well as Nika, for inviting me into this program today. So thanks a lot. And of course, thank you for all the people who took their time out to actually show up on the call. So today we're going to go through a few things about working from home and this whole mental health issue and how we're going to deal with it returning to the office. I'd like to invite the people on the call before we start to set an intention for the call. What is it that you want to achieve at the end of this call? What is the question that you're holding that's really important to you or that you hope to get answered during this call? I would say for the question that you're holding, if you could write it down, and I'm inviting you to write it down for two reasons. One, because it may be answered along the journey that we're going to take. And it may be that during this journey, you may want to reframe that question and ask it in another way. So let's see how that goes. So before we move into the meat of this matter, I would just like everybody just to take an exhale and to sort of ground yourself in this moment so that we'll be able to take the journey together and stay together for the next 58 minutes or so. And one of the ways in which I ground myself is really by asking myself, how am I doing? I know most of us, we get this question every time somebody sees you, they say, how you doing? Or they send you a WhatsApp, they say, how you doing? Or the email starts, I hope this note meets you in best of health. And all those things are just, really just euphemisms. But the invitation today that I'm offering is for you to really look at yourself and say, how am I doing today? And of course, that answer, there's no right or wrong answer. The answer could be that I'm happy. So I realize that you can hardly hear me. Okay, so make some adjustments. Okay, I'll make the assumption that everybody's hearing me better. And what I did, what people may have missed, is that I asked everybody to set an intention for being on the call with us today. Great, so it's clear. So being on the call with us today. And two, the other suggestion I made is that if you're holding a question that you want to get answered during the session, that you write it down. And during the session, pay attention to if your question has been answered, or you may want to reframe your question based on what you've heard so far. So those would be my two invitations. And just as we got notification that the audio wasn't very clear, the invitation was for you to check in with yourself and see how you feel in this moment. There's no right way to feel or wrong way to feel. It's just really to check in and practice naming how you feel. So are you angry? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you excited? What is the feeling that you have? And when you check in with yourself and you notice what feeling you have, I invite you to release it. And in this way, recreate a little bit more space and energy for us to go forward with our call today. So I'll just give you 2 seconds to do that. So our first topic, one of the things that we're going to do today is that we've broken down today's call into 3 topics. The first one is work-life balance. We're going to speak about it from that aspect. The second would be about mental health, positive mental health. And the third segment will be on returning from work. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but really I get energy off of your energy. Just as I provide you information, I know that the people on the call have a lot of experience, a lot of um, a lot of education. They have things that they want to say. And so this conversation, I would like it to be more of a discussion than me speaking for an hour. So I'm going to speak for about 8 to 10 minutes. Take some questions from the floor. Of course, you could use the chat to say what's good, what's bad. The chat is being monitored as well as the Q&A section. So that in the Q&A, you actually put your questions. So the first segment I'm going to talk about is, was it? With let me just check my notes here. The first segment we talk about work-life balance. And I think the one thing about COVID is that COVID has highlighted for a lot of us that maybe we didn't always have work from work-life balance. I mean, I know this is something that people struggle with all the time, so it's not a joke. But I think with COVID, because most of us were home for a period of time, we can try to work from home, that we had particular challenges. So let's talk about those challenges and let's move forward in terms of, I'll share some thoughts with you about what I have about working from home. So I know a lot of people who have kids and babies, they had a particular challenge working from home, and that is understandable. And we know that in 3 months' time, maybe in September, or 6 months' time in January, schools will be reopened, daycare centers may be reopened. So that's a kind of temporary situation. I think what most people struggled with work from home was that most organizations, they don't make a distinction between accessibility and availability. So yes, we're all accessible because we're home. We're not leaving the office to go to the dentist. We didn't leave the office to go to the hardware or to pick up children or anything like that. So high amount of accessibility, it does not mean that we were available. So there's a little bit of working out to do, and discussions to be had and conversations to be had between employers and employees around what does available look like versus what accessible is. So some of the main complaints I've heard is that, most times I am just being inundated with calls. I am always having to go to a meeting. Somebody calls an impromptu meeting because, of course, we've never had work from home before. Employers are not sure about trusting employees. So we're trying to micromanage and see if they really are where they should be at any point in time. And I think this is something that I have faith that that will work itself out because it's a new situation for everybody. So everybody's kind of trying to manage and see how best to do it. And of course, there's no one best way. Feedback and communication would be the way in which to carry this forward. And I think the bigger question is really around this thing we call work and life. And for me, I mean, a lot of people talk about, the separation of work and life. And I'd like to invite you to think about life as a continuum. So regardless, we get up in the morning, we have a bath, we shower, we have breakfast, we go to the office, we come back home. That's all part of life. There's no separation between my life and the work that I do. Showing up on this call is part of my life. It's not only about work, but it's a great part of my life. And I think part of this separation we feel between life and work is because in some ways we split ourselves for life and work. And it really is about what our assumptions are about work and what our assumptions are about life. And so I'd like to invite you just to do a simple, quick exercise with me. Just bear with me for 2 seconds. If you have a pen and a paper, I am just going to call some phrases. I'm going to ask you to complete them. So I'll give you an example. So if I say the phrase, I get angry, ... So some of us will write, I get angry when someone ignores my time. Somebody else may say, I get angry and the whole world knows about it. Or some may say, I get angry and then I cry. So there's no right or wrong answer. So I'll just ask you to write a few sentences, to complete these sentences. My mother said my mother said work, and fill in the blanks, ... The next one would be, My father said work dot dot dot. Just the first thing that comes to your mind, just there's no right or wrong answer. Next one, my mother said home dot dot dot. And the last one, my father said home dot dot dot. So when you look at your answers around this, ask yourself, where do my thoughts about home or where do my thoughts about work come from? Are these what I'm carrying forward from my parents and what they said? And is it relevant to me right now? So I'll share with you an example. So I've worked in corporate most of my life, and 3 years ago, I quit working in corporate and started this particular journey around, being a coach and being a leadership consultant and stuff like that. So in my house, I have a loft, and usually in that loft is where I worked most evenings when I come home from work, whether it is writing or blogging or doing whatever it is that I do. And when I left my job and I was home during the day, I was home every day. I used to go up into the loft and then I recognized, wait, this loft is really hot during the day. So what did I do? I did the same patterns I had when I was working. I would only go into the loft in the evening, even though I had a whole day to access the loft. It is only after a couple of months, I mean a couple of months, well, that I looked at it and said, Maxine, you're doing the same thing that you used to do when it is that you're working whole day. You're not accessing the loft unless it is in the night. So I had to think about that and realize that I was living in an old paradigm. This paradigm that said that I could only use my loft after 6 o'clock in the evening when it's cooler. Long story short, I had to really just change the location of my office and occupy another space in the house where it was air conditioned and I could work any time of the day. And I share that story because I think a lot of us sometimes, this whole idea of work life balance and the frenzy we feel about it, sometimes we're living a pattern that's not ours. Sometimes we don't recognize our behavior around it. And sometimes we bought into a concept that the two are somehow separate. And I see it all the time in organizations, both as a leader in organizations and now as a consultant, where it is people adopt different behaviors. And so a lot of professionals, they go to the office and they become what I call a drone or a talking head. And in their private life is where they open their heart and they open their soul, but never the twain shall meet. And so I invite you to think about a ruler and think about it that you're holding a ruler basically in your hand or it's on some surface. And on one end, on the right hand side of the ruler where there's the zero, you put the word work. And on the left hand side, on the first end of the ruler, if it's a 2 foot ruler, 24. If it's a yard, just 12. And on that side, you put the word home. So you have work on the right, home on the left. And just think about how much it takes to keep that ruler in balance when everything is blowing on that ruler. So if this ruler was standing in the wind, or if it was in water, we'd have to make sure that the work end is really rigid, and we'd have to make sure the home end is very rigid so that they don't really intersect with each other and that they keep the ruler in balance. I think that's how most people hold this work and home, and they call it work-life balance, right? The scary thing about it is that to keep that ruler flat and to keep it from swinging, we have to have a lot of tension between the two places. So every time I hear the work-life balance, I feel tension because what I'm hearing is that work is separate from life. Life is not part of work, and therefore I have to hold these two things as far apart as possible to maintain my stability. And so the invitation is for us to move those two words closer together. Just think about the middle of that ruler and having those words side to side next to each other on the ruler. Guess what happens? Those two words then become a fulcrum on which the two ends of the ruler can actually pivot. So this ruler is no longer being held rigidly. This ruler could actually sit on a fulcrum that is balanced by these two words. And actually, if the wind blows, it turns. If water comes, it stays steady. There is no tension. And I keep using the word tension, and the word tension, I've seen it been manifested. It usually is manifested in our bodies. So it's a Monday morning, we groan. I don't want to go to work. It also is like for some of us, when we walk through the door, we get a little slight tension headache because there is a sense that, we are leaving something. We leave in life to go into this thing called work. And of course, there are many, many remedies around that, and not so much remedies because it really is about your mindset. And the biggest question for me is that does your work make your heart sing? You know, it may not be that for all of us. It may be that some of us are in transition around the work that we do. So we're in a job that we mark in time for XYZ, and the more separate our jobs are from ourselves, the bigger becomes that work-life tension because there's no way in which we could integrate our work into our life. And I share this from a very personal point of view because for a long time I was an accountant. I'm a certified management accountant, Society of Management Accountants of Toronto, of Ontario. And when I worked as an accountant, I felt a dissonance and I felt the need to separate my work life from my home life because I was called upon to be something other than what I was. And maybe we could go down that whole road of discussion, but that's not really the point. The point is to ask you the questions. What is the tension that you're feeling between the two in terms of your work life and your home life? The other question would be, is what you're doing in work integrated with whom you really are? Or is it that you have to shed pieces of yourself to embrace this thing that you call work? And of course, the remedies are not about, let me repeat it, the remedy is not about leaving your work. The remedy is about how do you integrate these two essential pieces of yourself. And what does that integration look like? For some of us, that integration looks like finding the things that bring us joy so we can practice more of it, right? Because it is about the things that we do, that we love to do, that keeps us in a state of joy. So even if we have to go to a job which we have inherent tension in, when we return home, how do we continue our lives? The other part of it would be, what would it look like if we did not separate the two? If we began to think of work as an extension of our life and not something that is competing with our lives? And when you look at those four questions that I asked about what your parents thought about work, what your parents thought about home, what is in there for you that may suggest that some of your tension, where it may have started? And so these are some clues because life doesn't happen in a vacuum, and our feelings around that whole work from home premise does not happen in a vacuum. And I know some people will be saying, I really want I want something a little bit more tangible from this conversation. I want to be able to say, this is the way I do work from home balance. And so the remedies are about, the remedies that you would hear is about more separation and harder boundaries between the two. And I'm sure that you would have tried these and realized that they don't work because this is not about just our time. It is about our hearts and our souls and what we're going to do. So we have two questions on the floor, so then I share.
Yes. So the first question is, how do I initiate the availability versus accessibility conversation with my boss?
That's a good question. So, this is the way I would initiate it. I would say, okay, so the next time I have a request from my boss, right? So Maxine, we have a deadline of Friday. I want you to finish X, Y, and Z. I said, okay, great, that's no problem. So here's my challenge, right? I really want to finish this, and I need a couple hours to finish it, and I need a couple hours uninterrupted to finish it, right? Yes, I know that I'm on complete time, and yes, I know that therefore I'm accessible to you between 8 and 5. And what I'm saying is that to complete this work, I may not be available. So I'd like us to do a few things. One, can we have a check-in at a pre-appointed time? Two, I will log into the system so you can see me working, and whatever it is that people need to be comfortable to make it happen. So that's the way I would initiate it. I would tap it on to something that's going to happen anyway, and then I'll continue from there. And use the words accessible or available, and really have a discussion around it, what it means, what the challenges are for you, what it looks like, and of course some suggestions that you would make for how we could manage it better. Second question, Dinesh.
The second question is along the same spectrum, but managing the dynamic between colleagues. So the question reads, I am intrigued by the concept of accessibility and availability. These past 2 months have been an endless journey of meetings. My colleagues equate my being at home with me being available. How do I manage the accessibility with my colleagues, knowing I have to take time to manage kids, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a great, and I think that question sums it up, right? So I mean, for me, definitely is about scheduling. I am accessible to my clients 24/7, and I am not available to them 24/7. So with my coaching clients, I say to them, hey, you know what? You could take you could set a meeting with me anytime until 8 o'clock, anytime on Saturday, no meetings on Sundays. So we need to decide what our boundaries are. We need to discuss this with our team members and say, okay, on Wednesday evenings, that's my catch up time to do everything I need to do. Is it okay if we don't have calls on Wednesday? So it is about finding what works for you in terms of your schedule. It is in terms of negotiating, because we have other people, so therefore it's not our way or the highway. And it is about helping people maintain those deadlines by saying, for me, if I get a call on Sunday from a client, I don't take it. If a client has a problem and they have an urgency on a Sunday and they send me a WhatsApp and I read it, I will send them a WhatsApp back and ask them if it is that it's not, unless somebody died or something, then Monday morning, fine. So we have to set the rules, we have to negotiate, and we have to show other people. I think one of the trick I use for people is really what's in it for you. So what's in it for you for not calling me between 2 and 5 on a Wednesday evening is that document you're waiting on for 2 weeks, I'll finish it. So there must be something that we have to offer for people to give us back. So what I say to my clients, Sunday is my replenishment day. If I need to serve you properly, I need Sundays off. So don't call that, right? So hopefully that helps.
Excellent. At this time, we don't have any more questions for this topic, so we can move on to topic two, which is achieving and maintaining positive mental health during work from home.
So I think so. Thank you, Dinesh. So two points there, right? There's an assumption that we have mental health, and there's assumption that we have positivity. So I would just ask the people on the call, what's the state of your mental health? Like, do you even know? And I think that's the scary thing for me about when we have sessions on mental health, because unless it is that you know your state of mental health, there is nothing that I could say on this call or any webinar you listen to that will really assist you. So for the purposes of today, I'm gonna make the assumption that all of us are operating at a position of normal mental health. So when COVID started, I was pretty overwhelmed and very anxious. While just that all my colleagues on LinkedIn were like doing SEP webinars and attending webinars and learning stuff, I just had a complete shutdown. I was like, this is too much, and I need to just take care of myself and go very, very slowly. And so I did. I moved very slowly. I had no sudden movements until I said that I felt that I was in a position to move forward. And the thing about it is that I had no guilt about it. This is something new. Um, People think that during this time you should and you should and you should and you should, and I'm fine, you should do this and whatever, whatever, and you could do this and so doing this. And I know that nobody knows what's good for me except me. And I offer you the same, that nobody knows what's good for you except you. And however each of us handled COVID, and it's not over yet, is the right way for us. I think what a lot of people have not looked at is what have they lost during COVID. That's a question for you. What have you lost during COVID? What are you missing during COVID? And really being able to name these items and say, I am missing this. I'm missing seeing my friends. Missing seeing my family. I'm missing seeing somebody and walking up and getting a hug and a kiss. That makes me feel good. You know, what have you lost and what have you given up? Some of us have lost jobs. Some of us have lost a percentage of earnings. Some of us have lost opportunities. Some of us have lost things that we planned and saved for, a house we wanted to close on, a vacation we wanted to take. And those things are real losses because this is something that happened without anything that we did. There's nobody here on the call who did anything wrong to bring on the results that we have suffered through COVID. And the invitation would be for us to really recognize that this is to enter into a period of grieving for what we've lost. And grieving is a specific activity that we are not encouraged to do. We think about grief on a big scale, somebody died, I'm grieved. Yeah, go through a divorce, I'm grieving. And there's so much that we lose and so much that we miss that I would invite you to grieve in. And so most of us would be familiar with the 5 stages of grief, right? Denial, this isn't really happening. I definitely was in denial around COVID. It's a 5G conspiracy. It's they want to take over the world. Bill Gates wants to release a vaccine. So we go down that rabbit hole because we don't want to accept it, regardless of the reason it happened, is that this is where we are. So of course, after that comes the anger, right? I'm losing so much. I can't get my work done. The office is asking me for ridiculous things. And anger is a useful tool because anger always tells us what it is that we need. Anger can be a dangerous tool because most of us act out in anger. So most of us don't want to be angry because then we'll shout and scream or hit somebody. And most of us are called to identify, just as we did at the check-in, that, hey, you know what? I am angry about this situation. And the question always follows, what is my anger telling me? My anger is telling me that I am really mad about Corona because I miss seeing my family on a regular basis. So after we go through the anger, we begin to bargain, right? We start to say, oh my God, all those things I didn't do before Corona, I'm going to do it as soon as Corona is over. Because we kind of have a space in which we say, all the things I want to do, I can't do it. And you know what? There's a sense of urgency that when things return to normal, I'm going to do all of these things. And then there is the depression, because we realize that, okay, if we hold our breath, Corona doesn't go away. We realize that we are sad about this. We are a little down. The kids are home. We realize how much we love school because they're all over the place. And all of those things, so many factors we can't control. And at the same time, while we can't control it, so many demands are being made of us. So both the anger and the depression, I think, are the highest points. And then somewhere along the way, we begin to accept this is Corona. This had nothing to do with me. Working from home is painful. My office doesn't understand the needs. My manager is micromanaging me. And for my purposes of my mental health, I need to stay sane. So as we go through that, and I bring that up because a lot of times in our societies, we don't use words like depression. We don't really think about mental health. I think people think about mental health as this space in which you don't complain, and that's not true, because mental health means that I could check in with myself and say, I'm happy, sad, angry, bad, whatever it is, and it is okay. That's one aspect of it. Of course, there are many aspects in terms of the psychology and the neuroscience of it. And today we're just talking about it from a casual point of view. If you were not in a place before COVID of having great mental health, COVID would have been particularly stressful for you because a lot of your releases wouldn't happen there. So those of us who run couldn't run. Go to the gym, well, that's a hot mess. So a lot of people were left without their coping mechanisms. Some people, I mean, it was fun. It was funny, not funny, that when the stay-at-home order was announced, a lot of the um, a lot of the alcohol stores saw a spike in sales because people were self-medicating to get through this point of view. Just before I move on from this part in terms of the five and to deal with the positivity, which is the other assumption, just know that the five stages of grief, they're not really linear. So you may be in acceptance. It doesn't mean you can't still be angry that COVID has happened, that you can't still be depressed about what you lost, and you can't still be negotiating and saying, oh, when COVID is over, I will. And it's all okay. I think one of the biggest pieces about the mental health is that just us accepting that we've never been here before, that however we reacted, that's 2020 vision, 2020 hindsight, I should say. It's looking back, and really the offer is for you to say, where am I now and how am I going forward? Because we can't take back whatever happened, and all the feelings we had around it, they were relevant for our journey. So the other part of this little segment is positive. So positive mental health, we just spoke a little bit about mental health and just talk about the grieving process and how important it is to grieve. And I'll talk about positive for a little while, because the assumption again is that we are positive people. If you weren't positive before COVID, chances are you're probably not any more positive after COVID. And what does it mean to be positive? For me, positivity is about optimism, which is about holding on to hope that we have a better future ahead of us, that we have a future, that is better than what we had before and moving forward. So for some of us who are still struggling with the work from home, the availability versus the accessibility, um, who are still stuck in the balancing act of this work from home, which means that your work is now in your home, and resenting that, we may be missing the opportunity of saying, what is the future that we're painting for ourselves as we move forward from this situation? So some of the offers around the positivity would be, the past is over, which is really scary for some of us because before COVID, we may have been people who get a lot of joy after doing some things. Our egos may have been attached to some other things, and those things have proven themselves to be irrelevant. So I'll give you an example. So one of the examples is that okay, so I'll just wrap this up so Dinesh could bring any questions. A lot of people who were influencers on Instagram have declined their earnings. People who are hype men for parties, they're not seeing any earnings because those things may have been things of the past, but we live life one way. And so the question for all of us in terms of kind thought or positivity is, how are we moving forward? So I'll just take a question from the floor, Dinesh.
Yes, we actually have a very good one, a very realistic one. So it reads, I feel guilty if I take time away from work to see about my family. When I'm at work, I'm focused on work. And now that I'm home, I am still focused on work. But I also feel bad because my kids want to talk to me during the day, but I'm not accustomed to that.
Yeah. Well, I want to really celebrate your honesty and being able to say, hey, this is what is happening with me. Because that statement, I guess, could bring a lot of judgment from other people. So I want to celebrate your honesty as a first step. Two, I want to invite you to find another word for guilty. So I would suggest some. I am torn between work and my family. I'm accustomed to not seeing my family between 8 to 4. How do I deal with these kids? So I would like you to leave the guilt that you feel with this conversation, and there's power in actually naming it. So the question would be, what are you really guilty about? Is it because you actively turn off your kids or you turn on work? Then the other questions would be, What do your kids need that you're not giving them? Or what do you need that you're not getting? Right? So again, this is a situation where, like I spoke about the ruler, where sort of like kids on one side, that's family, and work is on the other side. And what would it be like for you to move the two a little closer together so that you erase that feeling of guilt of having to choose one over the other? Yeah. And some suggestions might be, set your routine, have lunch with your kids, have recess with your kids, the 10 o'clock coffee break, have the 3 o'clock coffee break with your kids. So in that way, it sort of lessens the tension between the two. Any more questions?
Um,
I hope
no
that
more
helped.
questions at this time, so I think we can move on to the third topic, and I think it's on the minds of everyone here, certainly, when the world opens back. So making the transition back to the working environment. You're on mute.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Thank you. I love this session in particular because it's about looking forward and not looking back, and knowing that that there are some ways in which transitioning to the office will not look the same. So it's sort of like where we reach the end of our grief cycle and we're accepting a way forward. We can choose how we're doing this. Of course, we could do so with much optimism, saying, "Yay, it's great," or we could say like, "Oh my God, it's all doom and gloom." Mm. So I think before we hurtle into the future, I'd just like to spend a few seconds about the last 6 weeks, because there's an opportunity for us to carry some of the learnings from the last 6 weeks forward. Um, Questions would be what worked in the last 6 weeks, and what I saw in the last 6 weeks was a lot of creativity. People who didn't do masks before, they're making masks. What I saw was innovation. Angostura making hand sanitizers in a rum factory, you know. And what else did I see that worked? Yeah, people could actually work from home, which is an opportunity, of course, if we get to get the balance of accessibility and availability right. And why I say it's an opportunity, because if I had a business, I realized that, hey, look at my great savings on rent, on providing coffee and tea in the office, maybe uniforms. If I were an employee, I'd also say, well, I don't have to commute and spend 4 hours in traffic every day. I could probably, assuming that management does not micromanage and they understand accessibility and availability, that we could probably, have a better work-life balance because we don't have to spend so much time on the road. It may be easier for me to integrate my life with my work, so I don't have to think about balance, but more integration. So we could there's an examination to be done from each person in terms of their point of view of what works for them and what didn't work, and what works for their families. So for some people, they might want to do this family cookout maybe once a month where they make some fancy dish for their family and everybody gets involved and everybody gets excited, because that was another thing that we saw a lot of, right? A lot of cooking, and new things. So you could ask yourself about that. What you want to keep from COVID, what you want to discard, or what we need to tweak to make it work. And that's both at an individual level and definitely at an organizational level as well. So when I think about returning to work, I ask myself those questions, both in terms of the clients I serve and in terms of myself personally. And so one of the things that I challenge clients to do and organizations to do is to really say, all those fancy things you have, your vision statement, is it relevant, right? The strategies you had, the goals and objectives you set, are they really relevant? Or, are they really tied into something greater? Because COVID happened and some strategies had to go out the door, and COVID happened and we had this unknown factor that nobody knew about, nobody could predict. And what did you learn as an organization about this, and how are you planning for your future, knowing that things could come and just totally blindside your organization? So all the people who are hesitant about business continuity, get on board, because that's clearly what's missing. If a pandemic comes, people need to be able to, take care of each other with immediate effect. And of course, you would know the specifics for your organization. I would like to press for the institutionalization of work from home. especially when children return from work and people don't, their children are at school from 8 until 3. So it gives them a lot of freedom to actually do the work from home properly. And I ask that organizations properly resource their employees with, if it is that there's into making sure the internet is ready, the VPN access, using company issued computers, not their home tablets and stuff, to make sure that we have a secure working environment and people are not frustrated by the limitations of their lack of technology. Um, definitely in terms of, I think a lot of organizations also experience the fact that their organizational structure does not support work from home. Conversation about accessibility and availability happen because some people are realizing that their jobs may be redundant as a supervisor or as a manager, as a team leader, because what they used to do in the office is no longer required because working from home really kind of operates on the premise that you are independent and can conclude the task independently. So I think from what I see from some of these, I'm not saying it's the same for everybody, but from what I see, there's some processes that no longer need the level of supervision that we thought they needed. And also too, if you extend that to the organization structure, we have to ask ourselves if this is not a time to flatten our organizations. So instead of having senior management, executive management, management team, team leader, supervisor, ask yourself in terms of if you're looking at the processes that you need to achieve your objectives and your goals, do we really need these structures? These are big questions. And of course, some people, when I say things like that, they hear redundancy, and that is definitely not what I'm saying. So think about it, right? Think about it. We have groceries in Trinidad who they're taking WhatsApp lists. All right, we're celebrating that, but is that really a win when Amazon has been with us for over 10 years and you can actually just go and put something in your shopping cart? That's an opportunity, right? And so some of us will say, well, oh my God, because they changed the process of getting food, we no longer need so many cashiers or so many people on the floor. But guess what? We need lots of people in the warehouse making sure that things are properly stocked and packing those boxes. So it may be time to think about how we redeploying people and where we put in people that will really support our organization and what we set for the organization. And of course, going forward with ourselves in terms of both as individuals moving back into the workplace, it's a good time to look at your resume. It's a great time to look at, am I really where I want to be? Because we all know that COVID brought those questions up and a sense of urgency. And therefore, if you're not where you want to be, how are you going to start planning for where you want to be? And knowing that that life is so fragile, what are you really sacrificing for? And what are you benefiting from being in a place that you don't want to be? So I think for on an individual level, the question is that moving forward, there's an expanse that was created by a contraction. So because we are so confined during COVID-19 and the pandemic outbreak, after it, we find a relief, which opens an expanse. And the question for you is, what are you doing with that expanse on an individual level? What do you want to do the rest of your life? If Corona came, what are the things that you regretted? And how are you going to make sure that you don't have those regrets going forward? Of course, at an organizational level, I spoke about it in terms of vision, mission, strategies, objectives, goals, and even for your teams. Are those things even relevant anymore? And if they're not relevant, what are we doing to make them relevant? Work from home, definitely explore that in a way in which it really supports your people, your processes, and your redundancies. Definitely check that out as well. So, and I want to just plant a seed here for returning to the office and as a way for us to move forward. Because this is my personal belief is that if organizations in Trinidad and Tobago and around the Caribbean, if we get it right, then we can get our countries right. And why I say this? I say this because if you have 10% employment, it means 90% of us are employed in some way in organizations. Most of us work 40 hours. Okay, most of us work 40 hours or more in organizations. So where better can we make change but in organizations? And before I take the questions, one last thing, organizations have the ability to impact on everybody because wherever you work impacts upon your life. It impacts upon you, it impacts upon your family, by extension, your community, and by extension, the country in which you live. So therefore, if we want to change things, organizations are the best place for us to start. That's my belief. Okay, I'll take some questions, Anish.
So I think this topic reached out to a lot of the participants because we got the most questions here. So the first, hi Maxine, a lot of people are suffering from a lack of social interaction and aren't able to unplug. They are not able to cut off mentally as well. What do you recommend as a healthy means of addressing this?
Okay, great question. So, lack of social interaction. So, I have never had a Zoom call with my family before COVID introduced that. I would suggest that's the places that you visit online. Have Zoom meetings with families and friends. All those little clashes. If you're into music, you can check those out. There have been a lot of free things. If you're more cerebral, then join those chats that are free where they discuss something topical around work or some skill or something like that. I think the lack of social interaction really impacts me personally because I didn't realize before COVID that I really was a social creature, and definitely those are some of the things that I have used to cope that way. And in some organizations that are more forward thinking, they have actually opened chat rooms just dedicated to water cooler talk. So it could be that with your colleagues, you start a chat, whether it's online chat or WhatsApp chat, where you'll just talk about whatever happened last night, separate from the work chat where people are setting deadlines. So those are some of the things that I've actually seen people doing in this time to stay socially connected.
Another one. A colleague said to me yesterday, I can't come to the webinar. I am constantly working. I don't remember the last time I didn't work on the weekends or did more work after I got home or just worked late. Now that I am home, that continues. It feels like my employer has the upper hand.
Mm.
I might be the best testament that work-life balance is a myth. How can I help my colleague?
Okay, great question. We all have to set schedules because the thing that as humans, the thing that brings us most pleasure and the thing that brings us most reward are the things that we're going to do. So, you, and there's a way in which we say things that are not necessarily always 100%. I don't want to say true, but in which doesn't represent all of the way we feel about it. Because the questions I would ask your colleague is, how does he feel working in that way? Of course, his answer will be frustrated. I'll say, what do you get? Well, they pay me money. No, what do you really get? Chances are that working that way strokes his ego. Because for those of us who are not stroked with that, we find ways to put limits on it. But a lot of us, because we don't have hobbies, we don't have things that we really pull us away from work. Work is our hobby. And I'll say this as a recovering workaholic. I'll say this as somebody who has stayed in an organization over 24 hours to bring up a ridiculous deadline in on time. I got a lot of joy out of working like that. Yeah. I got a lot of joy working out of that because I had a great sense of achievement because there was nothing in my personal life that stretched me, that challenged me, that gave me those vibes. So sometimes some of us have to be real with ourselves and ask ourselves the question, I'm complaining, but I'm still doing it. What do I really get? And for those of us who don't get it, but because the employer is on our neck, then it's time for us to have a conversation with our employer about, hey, I'm suffering burnout because a lot of people are now after COVID for exactly that reason. Um, how do I move forward? How do I limit my day? Because we have the answers, right? But we're not operating in a vacuum. We need to have that conversation with the people we work with and come up with strategies, and most of all, implement that strategy. But I don't know your friend, and I don't want to say how he or she is. I would just say that some of us get a lot of joy out of working that way. I know that I did. So I'm just sharing what I know. Any other questions, Dinesh?
Yes, a few more. This is a good one. How do we start that conversation with our boss, working more from home on a more permanent basis?
Um, so I think the question is always what's in it for me, right? So just a tip, when you're having a conversation with somebody, when you're going to negotiate with somebody, put yourself in the person's shoes and say to yourself, if I heard this, what would be my range of reactions? Also ask yourself, what is the one thing that I would hear from this person that would make me swing that way? So for me, if I have no conversation from work from home, I would say, I would start with what's in it for the organization. So what's in it for the organization is that if I live in a room and I have a 2-hour commute and for, for whatever reason I'm actually shut down on the road, I am reaching to work an hour late. And we all know that has happened. If there's a flood on the main road, I have to leave work early. We all know that that is. So there's a real argument to be made in terms of time, in terms of productivity, in terms of I'm not saying it must be clear that you will come to the office when it is that you're needed to come to the office. But I think there is a good argument, which is a logical argument that you can make in terms of time and savings, that you could present a case to your organization. Just whatever case you present, you must answer the question for the organization. What is in it for the organization to keep me working from home, and how it is that I will be monitored, how it is that I will achieve my goals, and what it is I'm going to do to maintain my part of the bargain. Because what I love about that question is that it gives you, what I love about the answer to that question, it gives you the independence and the creativity to create something that isn't there before and to lead that discussion, which your employers will probably be happy with because then they could extend it to other people. I mean, if I owned a business, I would cut my floor space in half. I really would. Lots of savings. Any other questions, Suresh? Thanks
Um,
for that question.
I just want to ask one more before we wrap up. So, there are some managers who associate productivity with being physically in the office. Do you think this will change?
That's a great question because I think it's I think the real okay, so I think that's the symptom, right? The symptom is that they say, if I can't see, I don't know what you're working. But the issue really is trust because they don't trust it if they don't see you that you are working. So that wouldn't necessarily change on a managerial level. It is the organization that will see if the organization believes work from home is something for them, then in terms of the savings and not having people at the office and not having to buy coffee and tea and all the other things, the organization will mandate it. And then of course with your manager you need to have the question about accessibility and availability, because in our society it is not normal or has not been normal for people to say that we trust employees to actually do as they say, etc., etc. Part of it is our history. Part of it is our history. A lot of it is our history, and a lot of it is because we have not, as a people, really been able to divorce ourselves from our history and say, what do I need now? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to carry forward with me? So those are some of the questions. I guess, Dinesh, we could begin our wrap up.
Um,
Are there any more questions?
One quick one, actually.
Yeah.
Do you think that the COVID will impact the Trini liming culture permanently? Do you think it'll change who we are as a people?
I love that question because maybe it's about time we redefine who we are as a people. And I don't think we'll ever stop liming. I think it may look differently in that the free flow between groups may not be there. That hugging and kissing, that jamming on each other, that might not be there. But it wouldn't change the essence of who we are. And it'll be a great time if we could really reconsider who we are and see what else is there that we may not be tapping into.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. That takes care of all the questions. So if you'd like to make a summary statement before we close.
Yeah, so I am one of those people who has been very excited about COVID-19. Well, once I got over my initial feelings of being overwhelmed and just being like, I'm not doing anything, right? So once I got over that, and what helped me get over that is really developing a routine. So I did every morning that could ground and anchor me. And as I said, do things like Zoom calls with friends and all those things to have my social interaction. But my excitement around COVID has been around we have never been here before, and all of us are in the same place. Nobody knows anything more than anybody. Um, and therefore, the question is, what are we creating going forward? So I always think about this time as a blank canvas. And you just think of a blank canvas unfurled on the floor in front of you. And you could decide what exactly you're painting on this canvas. What are you painting for yourself? What are you painting for your family, your team members, for your organization, for this country? And in a sense, we know that when we walk on that blank canvas, we are going to leave a trail like we never did before. And therefore, all of the regrets, all the guilt, every feeling we had during COVID, how do we move forward with this blank canvas and paint something that when we look at it, that we'll be proud of it and that we could push forward to have the lives that we want to create with it. So that's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Maxine. I'd like to thank you for giving us your time to basically taking on us taking us on this journey of self-actualization, making us think about what we're doing every day. And for me personally, there are certain feelings that I didn't even know I had that you brought out in me. So for example, I am from South, so my commute is genuinely 4 hours every day. But I now spend that time behind a computer typing emails or in calls or what have you. So I definitely have a lot of things to reflect on to improve my situation here at home.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to thank our participants for taking time out of their day to really listen to some of the insights and your suggestions. So after this session, the recording will be shared with you all, and Maxine has graciously agreed to share her contact information because I'm sure as you ponder upon what she has said, or as your situation changes and evolves, you may want to reach out and you may need to seek advice. And we'll be sharing her contact information. So if there's something that you may not have thought of about asking, or something that you would want to ask at a later date, please feel free to shoot her a message. She will let you know when she's available, and she'll also let you know when she's accessible. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and please have a great day. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.
Likewise.